Coming up on AbiliTV, we take a closer look at the proposed changes to the NDIS and what they could mean for people with disability, families, and the wider community.
We hear from participants and families who have already faced the challenges with the funding, access, and support.
You're having to justify why he's disabled enough.
We'll then be joined by some NDIS experts and advocates for a practical discussion about rights, advocacy, and what people can do now.
And later, we welcome Chandler J to the AbiliTV studio for a very special performance.
Welcome to AbiliTV. Hello and welcome to AbiliTV. I'm Breanna Medcalfe.
And I'm Brandon Johns. Welcome to Australia's only television show, hosted and crewed by people with disability.
In this episode, we're doing something a little different as we take a special deep dive into proposed changes to the National Disability Insurance Scheme, otherwise known as the NDIS.
And for a lot of people, the NDIS is not just a government program, it's the support that helps people get out of bed, communicate, go to work, study, and take part in the community, and also live with more independence.
At the heart of this debate is money, support, and sustainability. The federal government says the NDIS is growing too quickly and that the changes are needed to protect the scheme for future generations. But the 2026 to 2027 federal budget also makes clear these reforms are designed to save money, with projected savings of almost $38 billion over 4 years. For people with disability, the big question is what those savings will mean in real life, and whether people who lose access to the NDIS will actually have other supports in place.
A Senate inquiry has been looking into the proposed legislation, and thousands of submissions have been made by people across the country. That inquiry has now been extended, which means the debate is still unfolding.
So we want to slow the conversation down. We want to look at the human impact, explain what's being discussed, and offer practical information to anyone who might be feeling a little bit confused or anxious.
And to help us do that, we are joined at the desk by Maeve Kennedy, the CEO of Inclusion Australia. Maeve, welcome to AbiliTV.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Maeve. Before we hear from some other participants and families, can you tell us a little bit about what Inclusion Australia does and how your organisation has been involved in the Senate inquiry?
Absolutely, thank you. So Inclusion Australia is the national peak body for people with intellectual disability and their families. So we represent more than, or almost 500,000 people with intellectual disability around Australia, and we have a member in each state and territory. So we've been involved in looking at this bill and the NDIS reforms since it was tabled in Parliament. We sent in a submission to the inquiry. The inquiry's now been extended, so we're thinking about putting in another submission. And a colleague and I also gave evidence at the hearing in Melbourne in June.
We're going to be talking in more detail with Maeve soon. But first, as someone who's experienced multiple funding struggles myself, and the anxiety that comes with it, I wanted to meet with some participants and families who have already dealt with challenges in the NDIS, including funding cuts, difficult reviews, and the stress that comes when essential supports are constantly questioned. How important is the NDIS? With proposed cuts looming, I'm speaking to NDIS participants to learn about their experience with the scheme, as well as the impact cuts could have on the disability community.
Archie is our 8-year-old. He's got cerebral palsy. He's a 3 on the scale of 1 to 5. So he's a power chair user, he uses a walker, he uses a manual wheelchair. He also has some challenges with communication and with emotional regulation.
I'm Anya Christopherson and I'm a disability advocate and entrepreneur. I was born with a condition called VACTERL association, which stands for a range of different abnormalities. I needed reconstructive surgery, top and bottom, as a child. And what it meant was that there were going to be impacts for the rest of my life, whether that be digestive system impacts, immune system impacts. My life was very different to my peers, a lot of hospitalizations.
How has NDIS supported Archie and your family, and what difference has this made in your lives?
Most things that we've been able to do have been as a result of the funding and support that we've had from NDIS. Support to pay for therapy sessions, so that's with a speech pathologist, an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist. The other aspect is probably assistive technology, which has been really critical. Things like his shower commode and toilet chair, the frame runner that allows him to run.
I first applied to NDIS back in 2018, and all I wanted was just some funding to support me with my bowel irrigation system. Not being able to get that, I got sicker and sicker and sicker until I really felt like I was quite close to death. And it was only then that I actually received NDIS support, and it was almost 10 times what I was asking for originally. So I think having that understanding of these huge costs that actually come when we go give people support when they ask for it.
So we have definitely had challenges accessing some of these NDIS supports. Since he was 5 or so, there's always been something that we've had to fight for, and the fights take so long. You're having to justify why he's disabled enough to require that.
It's 1 in 11 people with disability have access to the NDIS, or some statistic around there. I have friends that are unable to access their homes. I have friends who have their lives risked because they cannot get the funding that they need.
So despite current struggles accessing and obtaining appropriate NDIS funding, the government is proposing cuts. What's your reaction to this?
I get really concerned that it isn't actually about the cost at all, that it's actually because we really don't care or value people with disability in our society.
There are obviously children who need help still, and there's not the structure there to support that yet, even though they're ploughing ahead with chopping people off. Are we going to end up rewinding to pre-NDIS days when it was essentially about people existing, not living?
We're just shifting cost away from the NDIS into other systems because people with disability are going to need support whether or not we have the NDIS.
Sunshine Coast-based disability advocate Finn Cole shared his thoughts on the proposed NDIS cuts during an open floor interview.
I also understand that the NDIS is not perfect, and there may be things that need to change, but it also creates jobs, keeps people employed, and helps people like me contribute back to the community.
There's been a lot of things in the media about how much the NDIS is costing the taxpayer, and there's quite a lot of negativity around this. What are your thoughts on this?
It is very hard to see people be so negative about NDIS, and I feel like there's been a systemic campaign to undermine the public's trust.
Our lives are being reduced to numbers in a budget line. It's so disempowering to have other people not only speak about our lives but dictate what our lives can be and what they should be. So I'd really encourage mainstream media and the government to actually engage with people with disability and understand that we have a lot of expertise that our lived experience has given us, and we have a lot of value that we want to contribute back to society.
What I really wish people understood is this: people with disability are not a problem to be managed. We are people with goals, humour, relationships, skills, futures, and lives that matter.
I would hope that in the future, funding NDIS would be seen like funding healthcare or funding education. It's just a no-brainer.
We are not just asking to be included. We are expecting it.
We have some really incredible disability advocates in Australia. We have some really incredible disability advocacy organisations. So I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to actually band together and show our strength as a community in actually getting through these changes, but hopefully stopping them from happening in such a negative way.
These stories are really powerful. You can hear how much time, energy, and emotion goes into simply trying to hold on to supports that people rely on.
Maeve, when you watch stories like that, what stands out to you the most?
I think what comes through the most is this is people trying to live ordinary everyday lives. That was the original intent of the National Disability Insurance Scheme, to give people with disability and their families the chance to live ordinary lives in Australia like people without disability do every day. So stories like yours, Breanna, and like those we heard in the video, we're not asking for extra, we're not asking for special. This is just the basics so that people are able to live ordinary everyday lives, go to school, go to work, be part of their community. And in the video, really thinking about these services as essential, like health and education and all the other things that we are so privileged to have access to in Australia. Disability supports are just one of those services that we know some of us need. Some of us will need them in the future, even if we don't now. It's really important that they're there for everybody.
Absolutely. It's about that longevity.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. And very well said, Maeve, and thank you.
Thank you, Brandon.
After the break, we will take a deeper look at the proposed changes, what the Senate inquiry extension means, and what participants and families can do during this period of uncertainty.
Season 3 of AbiliTV is proudly produced in partnership with Rope Disability Services. We are also proud to recognise our content partners, Melbourne Airport, SYC, Travellers Aid, Dreamworld and Voice at the Table, along with our story partners, Brisbane Airport, Skate Advantage and Travel Without Limits. Together, these organisations are helping us create more opportunities, tell more inclusive stories and shine a light on Australia's disability community. Want to help us tell the next story? Visit abilitv.com.au and request a partnership prospectus.
You're watching AbiliTV, the only show in Australia hosted and crewed by people with disabilities. We've got some incredible stories coming up this season. And if you don't want to miss any of the action, it's super easy to stay connected. Just scan the QR code on your screen. You'll find us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Join the AbiliTV community. Hit like, follow, or subscribe.
Welcome back to AbiliTV. Before the break, we heard from some people who are already dealing with NDIS funding challenges. And now, proposed spending cuts could see almost 250,000 people exit the scheme, while other participants could potentially see their funding dramatically reduced. This has been the subject of a Senate inquiry, with the government expected to vote on the changes in August. For the record, we did reach out to the federal ministers Mark Butler and Jenny McAllister, who are both responsible for the National Disability Insurance Scheme, to join us on the show. But despite several attempts, we did not get a response. I am, however, joined by some wonderful people who are going to help us unpack things. Joining me here at the desk is Maeve Kennedy, the CEO of Inclusion Australia. Maeve, thank you so much for staying with us today.
Thank you very much.
And joining us from Villamanta Disability Rights Legal Service in Geelong is Naomi Anderson and Elise Almond. Ladies, welcome to AbiliTV.
Thanks for having us, Maeve.
Before we begin, we should say that this conversation is general information only. It's not individual legal advice. If you are dealing with a specific NDIS decision, review, or funding issue, it is important to get advice that relates to your own situation. Now, Maeve and Naomi, this has been a huge and fast-moving issue. The proposed legislation has gone through a Senate inquiry. Thousands of people have made submissions, and the inquiry has now been extended until August. So I want to start with the process. Maeve, how is Inclusion Australia involved in the Senate inquiry? And what were the key concerns that you wanted the committee to hear?
Yeah, thank you very much, Breanna. So Inclusion Australia is the national representative organisation for people with intellectual disability and their families. So we represent about almost 500,000 people with intellectual disability in Australia. And we're a funded disability representative organisation. So we receive money from the federal government to do systemic advocacy and to try and make systems more inclusive for people with intellectual disability. We learned about the what was in the bill at the same time as everybody else. So on the day that it was tabled by Minister Butler in Parliament, and our team worked very hard to try and understand. I'm sure Naomi and Elise have been doing the same. We tried very hard in a short timeline to understand the breadth. So how much information and how many changes were in the bill. We prepared a submission that we put into the Senate inquiry, and then were invited to give evidence at one of the hearings. So it was myself as the CEO, and then Luke Nelson, who's one of our policy officers with an intellectual disability. And so Luke talked a little bit about his own experience as well. One of the things so from a process perspective, it moved incredibly quickly. We were just chatting before we started filming about more than 4,500 submissions in about 2 weeks. And the easy read information, which is really important for people with an intellectual disability to understand information, came out even later than that. So there were only 7 business days, I think, to read the easy read and then be able to provide a submission. There's also some challenges with the process and the way that the parliamentary website works. So we've submitted a video which has the voices and experiences of different people with an intellectual disability. The Australian Parliament House website actually can't share videos as submissions, so the committee can accept them, but they can't then be published online for other people to see. So there are some challenges around accessibility at every point of the process, but one of the biggest concerns was really the timing and how big the bill was. So how on earth, as people whose job this is full time, it's hard for us to get our heads around it, let alone people in the community who are balancing all kinds of other things on top of trying to understand proposed changes.
Naomi, how did Villamanta respond to the bill and the Senate inquiry?
Thanks, Breanna. We took a two-pronged approach. As lawyers, we felt a responsibility to really dig into what the legislative provisions were and respond as lawyers to that. But we're also very aware that the rest of the community doesn't habitually read legislation late into the night and needed some help to get their head around it and some time together to process what was being proposed and to workshop it and to understand it. So we, Elise specifically, and the team pulled together a series of rapid-fire forums for people to come along and understand what the changes were and just talk amongst themselves about what does this mean, what does this look like? Because as Maeve said, there was a lot in there and significant changes, not only to specific aspects, but to the overall approach taken to the NDIS, the overall concepts behind the NDIS. And that has taken some time to work through. So we also made our own submissions, and we're working with a number of other organisations in terms of them also getting their head around what this means and what that actually looks like for people on the ground.
The inquiry received thousands of public submissions in a very short period of time. For a lot of people, that shows how deeply the disability community wants to be heard. But there has also been criticism that the process has moved too quickly. Maeve, do you feel like the inquiry has been adequate in hearing the community's concerns?
It's a really good question, Breanna. I think that it's fair to say that the level of interest and engagement from the community is probably higher than our politicians were expecting. 4,000 submissions is really unusual. So the last time we checked, even for the tax legislation, so the tax changes to capital gains tax have been all over the media lately. The last time we checked that inquiry, there were less than 400 submissions. It might be more now, but at the last when I looked, and at the same time, we got 4,000. So the level of interest and engagement, I think, has really taken people by surprise, and they've had to extend the inquiry. It is just not possible to get through 4,000 submissions in that time, let alone to hear from witnesses across the disability community, particularly when, as Naomi said, there's so much in the bill. So firstly, you're trying to change lots of different aspects, but also some fundamental parts of the way the scheme works, and do that really quickly. It's just not possible to really be able to understand the impacts and what that will mean for people in such a short time.
Elise, what about from a legal and rights perspective? Has the process given people enough time to understand and respond to what's being proposed with the reforms?
The short answer is no. I echo Maeve and Naomi's comments about the really, really short time frame, particularly when there is so much contained in the bill. As Naomi said, we put together community forums in a really short time frame. The information was available to us on a Thursday, and the following week we did multiple forums. So number one, it was difficult, as we've already said, for us as experienced lawyers to wrap our heads around the changes. And then when we advertised these community forums, the interest was absolutely unlike anything that we'd experienced before for the forums that we do on a semi-regular basis. We kept selling out. We had limited places. I mean, we had up to 200 places in our forums because that's how much we could accommodate on an online meeting, and we kept selling out. And we kept having people saying, I really, really want a spot. So people were scared, they were engaged, they wanted to know what was happening, and they wanted that opportunity to really connect with their peers. So number one, trying to get that information out there, that was really, really tricky. And then for people to try and understand these are the changes, and then what does that mean for me, so I can formulate my response in the submission. There were so many things that needed to happen and so many complex steps for each individual to understand. To do that within the initial 2-week time frame was really, really tight. And I think now, as we've seen, the Senate inquiry has extended that time frame multiple times. I think they're recognising that that initial 2 weeks simply was not enough.
And I can imagine for the disability community as well, like myself being a part of that, understanding the changes in such a, I guess, a scary and short time frame is really important to helping them feel stable and helping us feel stable in the changes, and that, we're going to be okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also about understanding the timeline. So apart from how many changes have been proposed, they all start at different times. But also there's already changes happening to the NDIS, what they call new framework planning, and a new approach to plans that will start next year. There's already mandatory registration for SIL providers, and they've announced expansion of that. So there are already really big changes that are underway that the community understands and is getting ready for. And so there are big dates and times of change in our minds already. And then layered on top of that is a new bill. And we talk about it like, because it hasn't passed yet, it's just ideas, and there shouldn't be changes happening on the ground yet. But we know that some things are starting to change and that people are really worried. So even though it's just ideas and it's just being debated by Parliament, things are changing on the ground already, and it's hard to know, okay, well, there's this part of the bill and the access might change, but when would that start? And then we know there'll be cuts to social and community participation funding, but when would that start? And if they put a date in the bill, does that mean when it happens to my plan, or does that come at reassessment? There are just so many questions, and there's not enough time to even understand the what, let alone the when.
One of the big developments is that the Senate inquiry has now been extended until August. Maeve, for disability community organisations like Inclusion Australia, what does this mean, and does it create more opportunity for the community and their voices to be heard?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So the first thing that it means is we have longer to speak up, and we hope that means that the community is listened to. Another thing that it means is we need to keep looking after ourselves, because this is not over quickly. So one of the things we've been talking about a lot at Inclusion Australia is, and like we were just saying, there are lots of changes coming over the next 12 months and more. This is not short term. So even the inquiry will go on for another, for longer, for more weeks. We need to make sure we're looking after ourselves and each other so that we are okay to keep going, because more time to speak up is really important, and it's so important to share your stories and make sure that your local MPs and that senators are hearing your experiences and what you are worried about with these changes. But it's also about having the energy and the community support and being able to keep going through that time as well, because we know people are so very understandably very worried. So we're thinking about that with the extension too, is just, okay, we've got until mid-August now. How do we make sure we're okay to keep going, and how can we look after each other? And like you've said, Naomi and Elise, the community, the coming together, how can we make sure we keep doing that until, well, forever? We need to keep going.
Naomi, does a delay change anything practically for participants right now?
Yes and no, Breanna. In terms of having the delay, it does mean that the law hasn't passed, so it's not a thing that's happened. It's still, as Maeve said, ideas, which means, yes, we have more time to have a say about it, but things are actually changing in the background. We're all seeing it. Plans are having their funding cut. We are hearing planners say things like, you can only have a maximum of 6 hours community participation a week. And when challenged on it, they're saying, oh no, it's in the legislation. We're hearing planners saying that the law has changed, which the misinformation from the agency is very concerning. So you've got participants who have been told there is change coming. They're seeing elements of it happening on the ground. They've got more time to have a say, but they're already trying to digest what is proposed. As Maeve said, other changes are taking place in the meantime. It's a long haul. It has been a long period of consultation. We've had a Royal Commission, we've had the NDIS review, we've had the changes in the 2024 legislation, and now again, I just can echo what Maeve said, that we all need to measure ourselves in terms of our capacity to have input. Any further submissions don't have to be perfect. There's enough of us that somebody will say the thing that you miss out. We need to recognise that people will dip in and out as they can because we fatigue. And we all also have lives and jobs and other things to be doing. This came on top of everything else. And people will still be having plan reassessments, that things will change in their lives and they need to go through processes. So yes, it's good to have an extension, but it also extends the uncertainty and the pressure to explain what this means to the community, who clearly, from what we've seen, don't understand what the impact of these changes would be.
For viewers who may be feeling overwhelmed, let's take a step back. There's a lot of detail in this legislation and in the government's broader reform agenda, as we've just discussed.
Yeah.
Naomi and Elise, what are the key changes that people need to understand practically right now?
The first one to take effect is the proposed cut to community participation. And what we were told is that from October, the minister could make a determination that would effectively slice the funding available to people for community participation across the board, so affecting everybody equally, that would be cut by 50%. So if you think of anything you do outside of the house, potentially only half of that would be available to you, whether that's work, visiting friends and family, medical appointments, voluntary commitments, all of the things, getting your hair cut, getting your shopping, all of the things you do outside of the house. And that's a huge cost to ask participants to take for the sake of the economy. If you think of the effects it had on people during COVID lockdowns, that's all we're asking the disability community to accept so that the budget can balance. And that's hard. And we have been talking about those everyday experiences, but I have to say this week I've been really quite troubled. We've had a case brought to us where there was an individual who was living in the family home and was experiencing quite horrific abuse. That abuse hadn't been disclosed to anybody because of their isolation. And over time, they developed a relationship with a support worker who came to assist them in terms of community participation. They took them out of the house and out into the world. And in time, that relationship developed. There was a rapport and a trust. And the individual disclosed the abuse to the support worker. That support worker assisted the individual when they were ready to report to police. and to go through the process of disclosing what had happened to the police. What happens to this person if you take away 50% of their access to the community? Potentially they never develop a relationship with somebody that makes them feel safe to disclose. Potentially they are trapped in this situation forever because somebody in Canberra has decided you don't need to leave the house as much, you can stay home. That's what we're talking about. Elise.
One of the other big changes is an intent to really narrow down the funding that will be approved to only the impairments that have met the access criteria. So that has to be a permanent impairment, and it has to result in substantially reduced functional capacity. Now, that this has been attempted in previous years where the government tried to narrow down the funding to be only approved when it directly and solely relates to the impairment that met access. And at that time, the advocacy disability community really pushed back hard because, as we know, often people don't only have one thing happening in their life. Often people have a number of conditions that impact their day-to-day function. And also, we're humans, we're complex. It's really often an impossible task to narrow down. This person needs, say, occupational therapy. Do they need that because of their physical impairment, cognitive impairment, psychosocial impairment? It's not an exact science. Often it's simply not possible to really clearly identify exactly which impairment can be linked to the support need. So the advocacy disability community were able to put in a note that said, yes, the supports have to be approved in relation to the person's impairment, but also acknowledge a whole of person concept that a person will have their disability that met their NDIS access criteria, but also they'll have other things that can contribute to their support needs, and that has to be taken into consideration. That is being stripped back by this bill, that it has to be really clearly linked to that impairment that had to meet the access criteria. And that will be really, really difficult for many people. That will have a really tangible impact on the supports that are being approved. And there's also concerns about people meeting that access criteria. There's narrowing down of the permanency criteria. To be permanent, you have to have evidence that says there are no available treatments, essentially, that could remedy the impairment. So people have had to have evidence from their doctors that confirm they've tried XYZ treatment and it's not going to cure their impairment, essentially. There was really, really helpful precedent that said available treatment has to take into account the individual circumstances. So if a person's living in really remote Australia, maybe there is a treatment that's available in Sydney, but that's not actually available to the person because they have no way of getting there. They don't have the financial means. There's absolutely no way they could access that. The way the bill is being, it's changing that, is essentially overriding that precedent. So now, if it's available to the person in Australia, they may not meet that permanency criteria, even if in reality there are various reasons why that person in their individual circumstances can't access that treatment. And that's really, really concerning for us.
We've heard the government say that changes are about making the NDIS more sustainable for the future and making sure that it supports people with permanent and significant disabilities. At the same time, advocates have raised concerns about the scale of the changes, the speed of the reforms, and whether other supports will actually exist for people who may be moved away from the scheme. Maeve, which parts of the proposed legislation have brought the most concern for the disability community?
It's a really hard question to answer because there are so many parts of it that have been really concerning. But one of the things So I've already talked a little bit about the potential for increased restrictive practice use, which is a really big concern. Another big concern, which again goes against the findings of the Disability Royal Commission, is about the changes to social and community participation that we've talked about before. And so the mechanism for that is called a support determination. And at the moment, they've said the legislation would give them this mechanism, and the government will cut social and community participation funding by 50%. That applies to everybody, no matter what your amount is. But it also won't be written in your plan because it's a blanket cut. So you will get your plan and it might say you have $10,000 of social and community participation. And then the support determination comes over the top. So you only have $5,000. But they don't have to change what's written in the plan. So that's going to be really confusing for people at just that very basic, oh my gosh, how much can I actually afford level? But in terms of the impacts of those cuts, they're applied to everybody. So just like Naomi was talking about, for people who are in unsafe environments, for people who live in group settings who don't get to choose who they live with, and for whom going out during the day might be the only time they get away from an environment where they are not happy, all of that is going to cut by 50%. And there's no exceptions. So there's nothing, the only safety mechanism in there at the moment is that it says the minister must have regard to safety. And that's at the system level. So that's not each participant. Will participant A be safe if we make this cut, and will participant B be safe? That's just across the board. In general, I feel like this is a safe decision. We don't have enough information about what means safety, but there's also no way, like that's not a reviewable decision. So there's no way then to say, actually, there is a really genuine safety risk for this person, particularly for people who have very high and complex support needs, for example, with 24 hours of support a day. Social and community participation currently funds part of that day of support. So that's actually setting people up to be without the support that they have been that has been agreed as reasonable and necessary. That's the other part of the legislation, is that it's not going to matter what comes out as being assessed as a reasonable and necessary level of support or level of funding for you. The support determination comes in over the top. So, and that can be below what might have been assessed as reasonable and necessary. The other thing in terms of community access and a safety risk is the Disability Royal Commission was incredibly clear that isolation is unsafe. Community access is incredibly important for maintaining safety and building connection for people. So the changes that are being proposed reduce that, reduce people's access, make people more reliant either on group supports or staying at home. That has flow-on impacts for anybody who might support them and for families and parents potentially, and their jobs and their lives, but also genuinely just for safety. Exactly like Naomi said, we don't want to go back to a situation where somebody has to stay at home in a situation that a 5-year Royal Commission has said definitively is unsafe. That's a really big concern with the way that the bill is drafted.
Elise, a lot of people watching this may be feeling a bit anxious about the changes, and some people have already had their funding reduced, as we were talking about earlier. Others may be worried about their next plan, their meeting, reassessment, or access decision. What are some practical things that participants and families can do right now?
Number one, as we've said before, the agency are going to be looking more closely at the impairment that they have recorded as needing access. So number one is, if you don't know, keyword being know, not think, do you know what you are recorded as having met access for, which impairment is on the NDIS system? If you don't know, if you haven't received written confirmation from the agency, ask them, because that's really important to be aware of. We've seen people who have had disabilities end dated on the NDIS system. That is, they applied for the scheme with, say, a physical disability, a psychosocial disability, and they had no reason to think that they weren't approved for both of those disabilities. And then they do an FOI request and they get documents back. And it turns out, for some reason, say 2 years ago, the agency decided to end date their physical disability. And they think, well, no one told me, my legs still don't work, this doesn't make any sense. But by the time they come around for the next plan reassessment, the agency may think, well, no, we're not going to fund you for a wheelchair. You've got no physical disability recorded. So that's something proactively that participants should be doing. They should be checking which impairment does the agency have recorded. Is it accurate? If not, they should be either getting evidence or asking the agency, hey, I did meet access for this. What's happened since? So not waiting until that planning process starts and getting a nasty surprise, but also not making any rash decisions right now. As we've said, even though the bill is still hypothetical at this stage, we know that the agency are trying to cut costs. So if the plan is working right now, leave it. We don't recommend people try to do a change of circumstance request to try and get some more funding before the bill is potentially approved. If your plan is working, leave it. Do not bring attention to your plan right now. As we know, anytime the agency is looking at your funding, there's always a potential for them to make a different planning decision. So if your plan is working, leave it, but do check which impairment is recorded.
And if someone is faced with a funding cut, access issue, or plan decision that they agree with, what options do they have?
So, Breanna, for the moment, things haven't changed in that space. There are proposed changes to how that will work, but for now, there is still the process of going through an internal review, which means asking the agency to look at it again and have a different person in the NDIA make the decision, and then the external review, which is the tribunal. So those steps are still available, and we would encourage people to both use them, but also use them quickly. Don't wait, get onto them. But the other thing I would add is where you can, if you can't personally put it in writing, get somebody to assist you to put it in writing, send it through to inquiries if that's the only email address you have, because we do keep seeing situations where somebody thought they requested an internal review and it's recorded as a complaint or it's recorded as something else. Put it in writing, use the explicit language, I want an internal review of this decision, so that there is no confusion about what you're asking for, and go through the process. Advocacy is extremely difficult to get hold of, and we're all well aware of that and that it's not okay. Get yourself on a wait list once you start looking and going to the tribunal.
To finish, I want to ask each of you for a clear message to our viewers. Maeve, for participants and families watching at home who are feeling a bit worried, what would you say to them?
There's a couple of things that I'd say, Breanna. The first is you're not alone. Please remember that. We are in this together, and there are a lot of places you can go for help. Reach out to advocacy organisations or representative organisations for people with disability. And once you are comfortable and okay, think about sharing your experiences. It's really effective to write to your local MP or to call your MP or senator and tell them what's going on. They do pay attention. They do go to Parliament and say, we have had hundreds of calls, people are really worried, or no, we haven't heard anything. We assume it's not a big deal. So look after yourself, remember you're not alone, and if you can, contact your local MP or a senator in your state or territory.
Thank you. And Elise, what would your message be to viewers?
Maeve absolutely took the words out of my mouth. You are not alone is absolutely the key message. the silver lining through seeing how this really frantic bill inquiry has turned out is seeing the disability community really mobilise quickly, strongly. If you're not up to being one of the leaders right now, not up to doing a submission or calling an MP, just remember that there is that community to tap into just for support. And it's really important that we're all in this together. And yeah, no one should feel isolated or left behind. The disability community is so strong, and whatever happens, we'll get through it together.
Thank you. Maeve Kennedy from Inclusion Australia and Naomi Anderson and Elise Almond from Villamanta Disability Legal Rights Service. Thank you so much for joining us in the studio today. We really appreciate your time.
Up next on AbiliTV, we meet Chandler J, an artist who uses music to tell honest stories about identity, resilience, and finding confidence in your own voice. Plus, we have an in-studio performance. You're watching AbiliTV.
I think there's a lot of us in this situation.
They're people, they're women, they're our sisters and mothers and daughters.
Right now, hundreds of women over the age of 55 are either living in a car, couch surfing, living under the threat of violence, or are physically hiding.
We heard the statistics and it was quite horrific.
To have them in that situation, how's that possible?
It's devastating. Because I think it could be any one of us.
It makes me feel sad.
We don't want them forgotten.
This is a cause that I just couldn't sit around and not be part of it.
Are you ready to make a difference in the lives of the forgotten women? By sleeping in your car for just one night, you'll be experiencing firsthand the struggles and challenges that homeless women face every day. Can you take on the challenge? Register today for the Live Like Her Challenge and give one night of your life to help her home. Visit livelikeherchallenge.com.au.
This week on Travel Without Limits, we're heading to the US city of Seattle. Known as the Emerald City of the USA, Seattle is located in the state of Washington. When planning your itinerary, start with the most recognizable icon of the Seattle skyline. The Space Needle has large lifts to transport guests all the way up to the observation deck for stunning views of the city by day or by night. Transport enthusiasts will want to make a beeline for the Museum of Flight, the largest independent air and space museum in the world. The museum is accessible, with courtesy wheelchairs and noise reduction earmuffs available for loan, audio guides and tactile tours, social narratives and sensory days. And Seattle's foodie scene is second to none, so make room in your Emerald City itinerary for long lunches and delightful dinners. Sample local seafood specialties at the Crab Pot and Anthony's Pier 66, or head to Pike Place Market for fresh farm produce and artisanal products. For more itinerary inspiration, head to travelwithoutlimits.com.au.
Welcome back to AbiliTV. Now, we love finishing the show with live music. And this week we are joined by Brisbane singer, songwriter, and pianist Chandler J. Now, Chandler, you've been performing around your own music for quite a few years. Tell us a little about yourself and how music started for you.
Well, as you said, Brandon, I am a singer-songwriter and pianist, and I've been performing music from a very young age. I've been performing for over 11 years, and I couldn't imagine my life without music.
Yeah, great. Now, what do you love most about performing?
I love performing because the joy that it brings to other people, and also just how performing just helps me individually as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. Now, I also wanted to ask you about autism because I also happen to be autistic as well. So, has music helped you express yourself or build confidence?
Music has definitely been a confidence booster for me, and I've been able to probably express the truest kind of form of myself through music. And also writing music is my way of expressing my own thoughts and feelings.
That's actually pretty beautiful. What would you say to other young people with a disability or autism who might want to give music a go?
I say to them, go right for it. It doesn't matter if you've got a disability or autistic. Music is healing, and I like to think music is a superpower, much like autism.
That's awesome. Now, Chandler, you're about to perform a poem for us. Can you tell us a little bit about the song?
Oh, yes, I can. This song is called Perfectly Imperfect Me, and I wrote it about someone, a special someone who loves and accepts me for all my flaws.
That is actually very beautiful. Here's Chandler J performing Imperfectly Perfect Me. Oh, wait, scratch that, reverse it. It's Perfectly Imperfect Me. Sounds like me in a nutshell.
I used to chase approval like it held the key to being someone people thought I should be. Smooth out my edges, swallow my pride, but I lost a little piece of myself each time. You never asked me to be more than real. You only wanted honest, not ideal. I burn my toast, I talk too loud, get lost sometimes in a quiet crowd. You see the gold in the cracks in me, perfectly imperfect me. I fumbled through chances, messed up my lines, tripped over dreams I thought were mine. You picked me up and laughed through the fall. You don't see failure, you see me through it all. You never asked me to be more than real. Oh, you only wanted honest, not ideal. I burn my toast, I talk too loud, get lost sometimes in a quiet crowd. You see the gold in the cracks in me, perfectly imperfect me. Oh, you gave me space to drop the act, to show the parts I used to hold back. You didn't change me, just let me grow and love me in ways I didn't know. I burn my toast, I talk too loud, getting lost sometimes in a quiet crowd. You see the gold in the cracks in me, yeah. I burn my toast and I talk too loud, still get lost in a quiet crowd. I've never felt more like me, perfectly imperfect me, perfectly imperfect me.
Wow, Chandler, that was beautiful. Thank you so much for being on AbiliTV.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
And that's all we have time for this week. A huge thank you to all of our guests, our crew, and everyone who helped make today's episode possible.
Don't forget to follow AbiliTV online to keep up with our latest stories, performances, behind-the-scenes moments, and exclusive content. We'll see you next time for more stories from Australia's disability community.
Thanks for watching AbiliTV,
where ability shines.
AbiliTV is created in partnership with Rope Disability Services and is produced by Training Media Australia.